Hey, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jennifer and I'll be narrating today's story. This is a piece of human-written science fiction, so get comfortable and let's jump right in.
He lost his job helping an alien girl, unaware she was the Emperor's daughter. The Orion Reach shipyards hung in space like a rusted cathedral, all grinding metal and the acrid smell of welding plasma. Cole pressed his palm against the hull of a Starlancer-class freighter, feeling the subtle vibration that told him the portside thruster was misaligned by 0.3 degrees. The diagnostic computer had said everything was fine. The computer was wrong. "Sign off on it, grease monkey," his supervisor barked from across the bay. The Canthari overseer was all angles and irritation, his chitinous face plates clicking together impatiently. "We've got 6 more ships in queue." Cole didn't look up. He moved his hand 3 feet starboard, feeling the change in resonance. "Gimbal's shot needs replacement." "The scan says..." "The scan's reading the backup systems. Primary's failing." Cole straightened, wiping a streak of black grease across his already stained cheekbone. His flight jacket, scuffed leather that had seen him through 4 stations and twice as many near-death experiences, caught the harsh overhead lights. "You want this ship to spiral into a moon when the pilot tries a hard burn? Go ahead and sign it yourself." The Canthari's mandibles twitched, but he knew better than to argue. 3 years on the Reach had taught even the most arrogant aliens that Cole's instincts were better than their perfect machines. It galled them, but it kept them alive. "Fine, fix it. You've got 2 hours." Cole was already reaching for his pneumatic wrench when he saw her. She moved through the shadows of the cargo bay like a ghost, all wrong for this place. The Orion Reach attracted hard cases and harder luck. Spacers with prison tattoos, smugglers with dead eyes, refugees who'd learned to keep their heads down. This woman moved with a fluid grace that screamed wealth, education, privilege. Even in the dim light, he could see the faint luminescence of her skin beneath the ragged cloak she'd pulled over her formal clothing. Behind her, 3 figures in black tactical gear swept through the bay's main entrance. Corporate death squad. Cole had seen enough of them to recognize the gait, the weapons, the casual brutality in their formation. They were scanning, methodical, professional. Hunting? The woman's eyes met his across 50 feet of open deck. Gold. Her eyes were actually gold, bright as solar flares, and in them he saw something he understood intimately: desperation. Cole had approximately 3 seconds to make a choice that would ruin his life. He made it in 1. "Locker," he grunted, jerking his head toward the maintenance closet behind him. "Now?" She didn't question, didn't hesitate. Smart. She slipped past him in a whisper of expensive fabric and alien perfume, something like ozone and night-blooming flowers, and Cole opened his personal locker. It was barely big enough for his tools, but she folded herself into it with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to make herself small. He closed the door and had just turned back to his work when the squad leader appeared. Human. The voice was synthesized, emotionless. The speaker was vaguely humanoid, but clearly augmented, more machine than flesh, with targeting optics where eyes should be. "We're tracking a fugitive. Biometric signatures indicate recent passage through this sector." Cole set down his wrench with deliberate slowness. "Haven't seen anyone. Been under this hull for 6 hours. Your employment record indicates minimal social interaction and a history of..." The assassin's head cocked, processing, "insubordination. You would not protect an unknown individual." "You're right, I wouldn't." Cole picked up a welding torch, checking the gas mixture with practiced fingers. "But I also don't see fugitives that aren't here. Now, unless you've got a work order, I've got a thruster to fix." The assassin stared at him for a long moment. Cole could feel the weight of its scan, the prickle of sensors reading his heartbeat, his pupil dilation, the micro-expressions that supposedly revealed lies. He'd learned years ago that the trick wasn't to hide the truth. It was to believe your own story so completely that your body couldn't betray you. He believed he was annoyed. He believed he had work to do. He believed this thing was wasting his time. The assassin finally turned away. "Scan the adjacent sectors." They left. Cole waited exactly 5 minutes, counting the seconds by the rhythm of his own pulse, before opening the locker. The woman spilled out, catching herself against his shoulder. Up close, he could see the intricate patterns on her skin, bioluminescent tracery that pulsed faintly with her breathing. She was beautiful in a way that made him acutely aware of the grease under his fingernails and the torn knee of his work pants. "Thank you," she said, and her voice had an odd harmonic quality, like two notes played simultaneously. "I am." "Don't care." Cole cut her off, already gathering his tools. "They'll be back. Scans will show a heat signature discrepancy. You need to be gone in 10 minutes. "I cannot leave the station. They control all the docking bays." "Then you're dead." He said it flatly, without cruelty. It was simply true. Her golden eyes flashed brighter. "You would abandon me after." "I would keep my head down in my job." But even as he said it, Cole knew it was already too late. The Canthari supervisor had probably already flagged the interaction. Corporate security would review the feeds. They'd see him pause, see him look at the locker too long. He was already compromised. "Damn it," he muttered. "I can compensate you." "With what? They're hunting you. That means whatever you've got is already marked." He shouldered his tool bag, feeling the familiar weight. "You're a refugee, right? Indentured servant who ran?" She hesitated, something like that. "Right. Well, you just cost me 3 years of steady work." He started walking toward the service corridors, not looking back to see if she followed. She did. "Stay close, keep that glow thing under control, and if we get caught, I don't know you." Understood. They made it halfway to the lower docking levels before his supervisor appeared with station security. "Cole of Earth." The Canthari's voice was smug now, vindicated. "Aiding a marked fugitive. Your contract is terminated, effective immediately. Surrender your tools and credentials." The 2 security guards, heavily armored Vrosh with powered exoskeletons, moved to flank him. They expected compliance. Everyone complied on the Orion Reach. It was that kind of place. Cole looked at his tool bag. 23 pounds of pneumatic wrenches, plasma cutters, calibration rigs, and the small fortune in specialized equipment he'd accumulated over years of careful saving. His entire career, his entire identity, reduced to confiscated property. Then he looked at the woman, the refugee who wasn't quite meeting his eyes, whose luminescent patterns were flaring bright with what he now recognized as fear or anger or both. He'd already lost everything. Might as well make it count. "No," he said simply. The Canthari's mandibles spread in confusion. "You refuse to—" Cole's pneumatic wrench took the left guard in the knee joint. The compressed air blast wasn't designed as a weapon, but at point-blank range, it shattered the exoskeleton's hydraulics with a sound like a gunshot. The Vrosh went down hard. The second guard was already moving, raising a shock baton, but Cole had spent 3 years watching these armored thugs lumber through the shipyards. He knew where the weight distribution was wrong, where the servo motors lagged by precious milliseconds. He dropped low, swung his tool bag like a flail, and caught the guard's ankle. Another pneumatic blast to the back of the knee, and the second Vrosh toppled like a felled tree. "Run!" Cole grabbed the woman's wrist. Her skin was warm, almost hot, and pulled her into the service corridor. Behind them, alarms began to wail. The Orion Reach was a maze of maintenance tunnels and forgotten passages, the accumulated architectural sediment of 3 decades of haphazard expansion. Cole had mapped every inch of it during long shifts when the boredom threatened to kill him faster than the dangerous work. He navigated by instinct, pulling the woman through narrow gaps and down ladder shafts, always moving toward the scrapyards on the station's lower ring. She was breathing hard, trying to keep up with his pace. "You just assaulted station security." "Yeah." He vaulted over a bundle of power cables, hauled her after him. Felt good. "They will kill you." "Probably." They emerged into the scrapyards through a maintenance hatch, and Cole felt his chest loosen slightly. This was his territory. Thousands of tons of derelict ships, stripped hulls, and salvaged components piled in a zero-gravity junkyard. The black market operated here, far from the corporate oversight of the main docks. "Cole," a chittering voice called from the shadows. "Cole, my favorite grease monkey. I heard the alarms. You finally did something interesting." The informant was a Sesseth, spindly, with 6 arms and a nervous system that ran on paranoia and stimulants. She scuttled toward them across the hull of a gutted destroyer, her many eyes glittering with mercenary interest. "I need a ship, Sketch," Cole said without preamble. "A ship. Of course, a ship. Everyone needs a ship when station security wants to fill them with holes." Sketch's laughter was like breaking glass. "But ships cost money, and I hear your contract is terminated?" "I've got tools. Tools I can sell to 12 other mechanics before." Sketch's eyes finally focused on the woman beside Cole, and all 6 of her arms went perfectly still. Oh no. Cole, do you know who that is?" "Gee. That is Princess Vespera of Aethelgard." Sketch's voice dropped to a horrified whisper. "That is the crown princess of the Aethelgard Empire. That is the most valuable person in this entire sector, and you brought her to my scrapyard." Cole turned slowly to look at the woman, Vespera. She met his gaze steadily, her bioluminescent patterns flaring bright with something that might have been defiance or shame. "You lied to me," he said quietly. "I omitted certain details. You're a princess." "Yes, they're hunting a princess." "A faction within my father's court wants me dead, a succession dispute." She lifted her chin, every inch the royal now. "I needed to escape. You helped me. I am grateful." Cole wanted to hit something. Instead, he turned back to Sketch. "The ship, now." "The bounty on her is—" "The ship, or I tell security you've been selling military-grade components to the Hask Rebellion." Sketch's eyes narrowed, but she skittered toward a far corner of the yard. "Bay 7, scout class. Hardly functional, but the reactor's good. You're a dead man, Cole. Both of you." The ship was exactly as described. A battered Wayfarer scout, all sharp angles and scorch marks, sitting in a launch bay that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Cole ran his hands over the hull, feeling the story of the ship through his fingertips. Combat damage, poorly repaired, reactor humming but unstable, thruster alignment off by at least 2 degrees. It would fly for a while. "Can you pilot it?" Vespera asked. "I can make it work." He was already climbing into the cramped cockpit, his fingers dancing across manual controls that most pilots had forgotten existed. "Strap in." Behind them, the sound of heavy boots echoed through the scrapyard. The death squad had found them. Cole didn't wait for clearance. He slammed the reactor to full burn, and the Wayfarer tore out of the docking bay in a spray of sparks and superheated plasma. Alarms shrieked. Something in the portside thruster exploded in a shower of components. They were flying. Vespera was pressed back into her seat, her patterns blazing like lightning across her skin. "You are insane." "Probably," Cole agreed, wrestling with the controls as the ship shuddered and bucked. "But we're alive." For now, deep space was silent. Cole had always loved that about it. The way the infinite void swallowed all sound, leaving only the vibration of the ship around him. In the 3 days since their escape from the Orion Reach, he'd barely spoken to Vespera. She stayed in the passenger compartment, and he stayed in the cockpit, nursing the Wayfarer's failing systems with prayers and improvisation. On the 4th day, the reactor began to die. It started as a vibration, subtle enough that the ship's computer didn't register it, but Cole felt it through the deck plates, through the walls, through the chair he'd barely left. The harmonic was wrong, degrading, slipping toward catastrophic failure. "We're losing power," Vespera said from the doorway. She'd been watching the readouts over his shoulder. "The computer suggests—" "The computer's wrong." Cole was already stripping off his flight jacket down to his undershirt. The engine compartment would be hot. Reactor shielding on Scout-class ships was minimal to save weight. "I'm going in." "That's impossible. The radiation—" "Is manageable for short periods. Human bone marrow regenerates." He grabbed his tool bag, already sweating in anticipation of the heat. "Just stay out of the way." The engine compartment was a coffin of heat and light. The reactor core burned at the center, a miniature sun held in magnetic containment. Cole squeezed through the access tunnel, feeling the temperature rise with every inch. By the time he reached the core, his undershirt was soaked through, and his exposed skin felt tight and angry. He pressed his palm against the containment housing. There. A microfracture in the magnetic coil, invisible to scanners but clear as day to his touch. The field was collapsing by micrometers every hour, and when it failed completely, they'd have approximately 3 seconds before the reactor turned them into expanding plasma. "Hand me the quantum spanner," he called back through the tunnel. Vespera's luminous face appeared at the entrance. "I don't know what that is." "Tool bag, silver thing, looks like a wrench had a baby with a computer." She fumbled through his tools, her movements uncertain. She'd probably never held a wrench in her life. When she found it, she had to crawl halfway into the tunnel to reach him, her body pressed against the narrow walls. "This is madness," she said, passing him the tool. "No one repairs a reactor manually." "No one you know." Cole began the delicate work of realigning the magnetic coils. His hands were steady despite the heat, despite the radiation counter on his belt ticking steadily upward. "Your people use AI for this?" "For everything. Why would we risk lives when machines can—" "Because machines don't understand vibration. They don't feel when something's wrong." He adjusted the coil by micrometers, watching the containment field stabilize. "They can't diagnose by touch." "That's primitive." "That's human." He needed another tool deeper in the bag. "Phase driver blue handle." She passed it to him, but in the cramped space their hands touched. Her skin was fever-hot, and the contact made her bioluminescent patterns flare brilliant gold. For a moment, they were both still, pressed together in the narrow tunnel with the reactor burning behind them. "You're glowing," Cole said. "It's autonomic. When I experience strong emotion." She didn't pull away. "You fascinate me." "I'm a mechanic." "You're chaos." Her golden eyes were very close to his. "My people have spent millennia perfecting logic, order, predictability. You act on instinct. You feel heat and pain, and you smile." "I'm not smiling." "You are, slightly." Her voice had that harmonic quality again. "You enjoy this, the danger." Cole realized she was right. His lips had curved into something like satisfaction as he worked, as he felt the ship respond to his touch. He was in control here in this burning coffin, in a way he'd never been in his life. "Phase driver," he said, because he didn't know what else to say. They worked for 3 hours. Vespera stayed with him, passing tools, learning the names of things she'd never needed to know. The heat became oppressive, suffocating. Cole's hands shook with fatigue and radiation sickness. But slowly, painfully, the reactor stabilized. When they finally crawled out of the engine compartment, Cole collapsed on the deck plates. His skin was burned, his hands blistered. Vespera knelt beside him, her cool fingers touching his forehead. "You're hurt." "I'm functional," but when he tried to sit up, his vision swam. "Maybe, give me a minute." She helped him to the crew quarters, supporting more of his weight than he wanted to admit. The ship had a tiny medical bay, barely more than a cabinet, and she found a radiation flush kit with the awkward determination of someone reading instructions for the first time. "This will help," she held up the injector. "Yeah, just right there," he pointed to his neck. "Jugular." Her hands were surprisingly steady as she administered the injection. The flush burned through his veins, nauseating and necessary. Cole closed his eyes and concentrated on not vomiting. When he opened them again, Vespera was still there, sitting on the deck beside his bunk. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what? Getting you trapped on a dying ship in the middle of nowhere?" "For not selling me." Her patterns pulsed slowly, hypnotic. "The bounty is substantial. You could have lived comfortably for years." "Yeah, well," Cole tried to shrug, but his shoulders protested. "I'm not that smart." "No," she smiled, and it transformed her face from ethereal to something warmer, more immediate. "You're something better." The ship's long-range comms came online 2 days later, and with them, the truth. Cole was in the cockpit, running diagnostics when the first transmission hit. It was broadcast across all frequencies, impossible to block, impossible to ignore. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a seal he didn't recognize and a face that looked like Vespera's but older, harder. "By imperial decree," the figure announced, "a bounty of 10 million credits is offered for information leading to the safe return of Crown Princess Vespera of Aethelgard. The princess was abducted from—" Cole killed the feed. Abducted, not hunted, not fleeing assassination. Abducted. He found Vespera in the common area, staring at nothing. She knew. Of course she knew. The transmission had probably played on every screen in the ship. 10 million, Cole said. His voice was flat. That's what you're worth? In reality, I am priceless. The Empire's stability depends on... Don't. He held up a hand. Don't give me political explanations. You lied. You told me you were running from assassins. I am. She stood, and her patterns flared with agitation. My cousin wants me dead. My father's advisors want me married off to secure an alliance. I was a prisoner in everything but name, and when I tried to leave, they sent killers. So you let me think you were some refugee, someone who needed help. I did need help. Her voice rose, that harmonic quality becoming almost dissonant. I needed someone who would help me without calculating political advantage, someone who would act on instinct instead of logic. You needed someone stupid enough to throw away his life. I needed someone brave enough to care. They stared at each other across the small space. Cole felt the anger burning in his chest, but underneath it was something more complicated. She was right. If he'd known who she was, he would have walked away, wouldn't he? The transmission said you were abducted, he said finally. That means they think someone took you by force. My father would never admit his daughter fled. It would show weakness. So as far as the Empire knows, I'm a kidnapper. Yes. Great. Cole sank into a chair, running his hands through his short-cropped hair. So every bounty hunter, every corporate security force, every opportunistic pirate in this sector is looking for us. And they all think I'm holding you hostage. I will tell them the truth when we reach... Reach where? He laughed, and it came out bitter. There's nowhere to go. You can't go home. I can't go back to the Reach. We're dead, Your Highness. We're just waiting for someone to notice. Vespera crossed the room to stand in front of him. Her luminous patterns had settled into something almost sad, deep blues and purples that reminded him of twilight. I am sorry, she said. Truly, I did not intend to. No one ever does. But the anger was already fading, replaced by exhaustion. It doesn't matter. What's done is done. If you want to collect the bounty... I'm not selling you. The words came out automatically, and he realized they were true. I might be stupid, but I'm not that much of a bastard. Then what will you do? Cole looked at the star charts displayed on the console. They were in the outer reaches of the Helios sector, far from any major trade routes, deep space where ships went to disappear. There's a nebula, he said slowly, the Ashmark Cloud. Sensor interference makes it impossible to scan. If we can make it there, we can hide, figure out our next move. 3 days, maybe 4, depending on how much power I can coax out of the reactor. Vespera nodded. Then, hesitantly, she reached out and touched his shoulder. For what it is worth, I am glad it was you who found me. Cole didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and turned back to the controls, plotting a course toward the one place in the galaxy where they might have a chance. The Ashmark Cloud was beautiful and deadly. It hung in space like a watercolor painting, all swirling violets and deep reds, shot through with lightning from stellar formation. The nebula was young, barely 1 million years old, and still electrically active. Sensors couldn't penetrate it. Most pilots avoided it. Cole flew straight in. This is insane, Vespera said, gripping her seat as the ship bucked and shuddered. You keep saying that. Cole was flying manually, his hands on the physical controls, feeling the ship through the stick. The computer screamed warnings at him: radiation, electromagnetic interference, collision hazard. He ignored all of it. Trust me. I am beginning to think trust is a dangerous instinct. Now you're learning. The nebula swallowed them. Visibility dropped to nothing, replaced by churning clouds of ionized gas. Cole flew by feel, following the subtle changes in the ship's vibration, the way the hull sang differently when they passed through density pockets. It was like navigating by echolocation, except he was the sonar. They made it 6 hours before the Imperial ships found them. The first warning was a lance of coherent light that passed so close to their hull that it left a scorch mark. Cole threw the ship into a roll, and Vespera made a sound that was half gasp, half curse. They followed us, she shouted over the alarms. Of course they did. Cole was already diving deeper into the nebula, using the gas clouds as cover. Your cousin's assassins, they're good. 3 ships on sensors. Sleek Imperial hunters with AI-optimized flight paths and enough firepower to vaporize the Wayfarer 10 times over. They moved in perfect formation, predictable and efficient. Predictable was exploitable. Hold on, Cole said. He killed the power. Every system shut down at once. Engines, life support, sensors, lights. The ship went dark and silent, a dead piece of metal drifting in the electromagnetic storm. Vespera's bioluminescent patterns were the only light, painting the cockpit in ghostly gold. "What are you doing?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Dead stick maneuver." Cole had his palm pressed against the console, feeling the vibration of the Imperial ships through the nebula's interference. "Their AI can't scan us if we're not emitting anything. We're just debris now." "We are drifting blind." "I'm not blind." He could feel it. The way the ship moved through the gas, the subtle currents of the nebula, the electromagnetic eddies that pushed and pulled. "I know where we are." The Imperial ships passed within a kilometer, their searchlights cutting through the murk. Cole held his breath, held perfectly still. They passed. "Now," Cole whispered. He slammed the reactor back to full burn. The Wayfarer roared to life, and Cole threw them into a hard burn perpendicular to the Imperial ship's flight path. By the time their AI compensated and redirected, he was already deep into a dense patch of the nebula where their sensors would be useless. "You are flying without instruments," Vespera said. She wasn't gripping her seat anymore. She was leaning forward, watching him with those golden eyes. "In a nebula, against AI pilots." "Yeah, that should be impossible." "Should be." He pulled them through a particularly dense cloud, feeling the way the ship's nose wanted to drift starboard. He compensated instinctively, but it's not. Another pass. Another close call. The assassins were adapting, trying to herd him toward the nebula's edge where they'd have clear sensor returns. But every time they thought they had him cornered, Cole found another current, another density pocket, another impossible maneuver that their perfect algorithms couldn't predict. 'Cause he wasn't calculating, he was feeling. "They're breaking off," Vespera said, watching the sensors. "They're retreating." "They're calling for reinforcements." Cole finally let himself breathe. "We bought ourselves time, maybe a day, maybe less." He set them on a slow drift deeper into the nebula, then engaged the autopilot on minimal power. When he finally let go of the controls, his hands were shaking with fatigue. Vespera was staring at him. "What?" he asked. "You are extraordinary," she said quietly. "Do you know that?" "I'm a mechanic who can fly a little." "No." She unbuckled from her seat and floated across the zero-G cockpit to him. In the dim light of her patterns, her face was alien and beautiful and so close. "You are proof that logic is not enough, that calculation is not superior to instinct, that humanity's chaos is not a weakness." "Vespera." She kissed him. It was sudden and desperate and electric. Her lips were warm, her skin fever-hot against his, and when his hands found her waist, her bioluminescent patterns flared brilliant gold, bright enough to light the entire cockpit. She tasted like ozone and something sweet he couldn't name. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I should not have," she started. "Don't." Cole pulled her back, kissed her again, deeper this time. "Don't apologize." They floated there in the darkness, wrapped around each other, while outside the ship, the nebula churned and the assassins regrouped and the entire Imperial fleet searched for them. For just a moment, none of it mattered. They found a desolate moon on the nebula's edge, a dead rock with no atmosphere and no name, just a designation in the ship's outdated charts. Cole landed them in the shadow of a crater wall, where the Wayfarer would be invisible to passive scans. "We need to vent the heat sinks," he explained as he shut down the engines. "All that maneuvering built up thermal signatures. If we don't cool down, they'll spot us from across the sector." "How long?" 12 hours. Maybe more. He was already climbing out of the pilot's seat, his body aching from hours of high-G burns. "There's emergency supplies in the cargo hold. Not much, but enough." The moon's surface was alien and stark, all sharp angles and deep shadows lit only by the reflected light of the nebula. They set up the emergency shelter in the crater's lee, a transparent dome that would retain heat while giving them a view of the stars. Inside it felt impossibly intimate. "I've never seen a moon like this," Vespera said. She was sitting cross-legged on the thermal blanket, her formal suit traded for one of Cole's spare undershirts. It hung on her like a tent, but somehow made her look more real, less like an untouchable princess. So empty. Most places are empty. That's what space is. Cole was working on a portable heater, coaxing it back to life with techniques that probably violated several safety regulations. Your empire just hides it with stations and trade routes, makes people forget. Forget what? How small we all are. The heater coughed to life, radiating blessed warmth. How fragile. Vespera was quiet for a long moment. Her bioluminescent patterns had settled into a soft, steady glow. Not the brilliant flares of emotion, but something gentler, contemplative. "Tell me about Earth," she said finally. "Why?" "Because I want to understand you." Cole sat back, surprised by the question. No one ever asked about Earth. To most of the galaxy, humanity was barely worth noticing. A young species from an unremarkable planet, good for manual labor, and not much else. "It's a water world," he said slowly. 70% ocean, the rest is all mountains and forests and deserts. It's messy and chaotic and everything's trying to kill you. He smiled despite himself. "It's perfect." "Do you miss it?" "Every day." The admission surprised him. "But I can't go back, nothing for me there." "Your family?" "Gone. A transport accident when I was 15. He said it matter-of-factly, the way you talked about old pain that had scarred over. "I've been working stations ever since. Learned to fix engines because ships need mechanics and mechanics get to eat." Vespera reached across the small space and took his hand. Her skin was still hot but comfortable now, like sunlight. "I am sorry." "Don't be, I survived. That's the human gift, right? We persist." He squeezed her hand. "What about you? What's it like being a princess?" Her expression darkened, cold, calculated, every action measured against political consequence, every word scripted by advisors. Her patterns flickered, disturbed. "I have never made a choice that was truly mine until I ran. And now? Now I am a fugitive with a mechanic on a dead moon, hiding from my own empire." She smiled, and it was radiant. "It is the freest I have ever been." They sat in silence for a while, hands joined, watching the nebula churn beyond the dome. The heater hummed, the ship's metal creaked as it cooled, and slowly, inevitably, they moved closer together. "Cole," Vespera said softly, "when you kissed me in the ship, if you're going to tell me it was a mistake—" "It was not a mistake," her golden eyes found his, "but I need you to understand, I have never, with anyone—" "You're a virgin?" The word sounded crude, but he couldn't think of a better way to say it. "My culture prizes logic over passion. Physical intimacy is clinical, calculated for genetic compatibility." She looked away, embarrassed. "I have never felt what I feel with you." Cole cupped her face, gently turning her back to meet his gaze. "What do you feel?" "Heat," she whispered. "Chaos, like I am burning from the inside out." He kissed her then, slow and deliberate, nothing like the desperate collision in the cockpit. This was exploration, discovery. Her lips parted under his, and she made a small sound of surprise and pleasure that shot straight through him. "Is this," she gasped when he moved to her neck, finding the place where her bioluminescent patterns pulsed fastest, "is this what humans—" "This is what humans do when they want someone." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "But we stop whenever you say stop. Understand?" "I do not want to stop." They moved together in the small shelter, learning each other's bodies with the same focus Cole brought to repairing engines. Every touch was deliberate, every response catalogued. When he pulled her undershirt over her head, her patterns blazed brilliant gold, painting their bodies in living light. She was beautiful and alien and impossibly present, gasping his name as his hands mapped territory no one had ever touched. When they finally came together, her patterns went supernova bright, and Cole felt like he was burning up in the best possible way. Afterward, they lay tangled in the thermal blankets, her head on his chest, his hand tracing idle patterns on her luminous skin. "That was," she started. "Yeah. I understand now why humans value this, why you feel so much." Her fingers found his heartbeat, pressing against his sternum. It is terrifying and wonderful. Welcome to being human. She laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that made her whole body shake. Is this what it is always like for you, this intensity? No, Cole was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. This is new. She lifted her head to look at him, her golden eyes searching. New? I've been with people before, but it was never... He struggled for the right words. It was never this. Vespera's patterns pulsed warm and steady, like a heartbeat made of light. She kissed him again, soft and sweet, and whispered against his lips, "Stay with me. When this is over, whatever happens, stay." Cole wanted to say yes, wanted to promise her everything. Instead, he just held her closer and watched the stars wheel overhead, knowing that tomorrow the fleet would come, and all the heat and chaos in the universe wouldn't save them. But tonight they had this. The Imperial fleet arrived at dawn, or what would have been dawn if the moon had a sun to rise. Cole saw them on the long-range sensors while Vespera still slept, curled in the thermal blankets with her patterns dimmed to a gentle glow. 15 ships. No, 17. More jumping in every minute, creating a blockade that stretched across the entire sector. This wasn't a search party. This was an armada. Vespera. He shook her gently. We need to go now. She woke instantly, all traces of sleep vanishing as her royal training reasserted itself. How many? Too many. He was already suiting up, moving with practiced efficiency. They're not trying to capture you anymore. This is a kill order. My cousin. Her voice was hard. He has convinced my father I am dead or beyond saving. The fleet is here to eliminate witnesses. Meaning me. Meaning both of us. They collapsed the shelter and made it back to the Wayfarer in minutes. Cole ran through pre-flight as fast as he dared, feeling the ship's systems wake sluggishly. The reactor was still warm from their escape through the nebula, but the heat sinks were only half cleared. They'd show up on thermal scans like a beacon. Can we run? Vespera asked from the co-pilot's seat. Not fast enough. Cole pulled up the tactical display. The fleet was moving into position, creating an overlapping grid of sensor coverage. No way through, no way around. They've got us. Then we fight. He almost laughed. This is a scout ship. We've got 1-point defense laser and some sensor jammers. They've got enough firepower to glass a planet. So we die? No. Cole was staring at the reactor readout, an idea forming that was probably suicidal and definitely insane. We cheat. He dove into the engine compartment, Vespera right behind him. The reactor core hummed contentedly, stable after his earlier repairs. Too stable. What he needed was controlled instability. What are you doing? Vespera asked as he began pulling safety limiters. Jury rigging. It's a human specialty. He disconnected the first thermal regulator, then the second. The reactor's temperature began to climb. Reactor cores have safety systems to prevent overload, but those systems also limit power output. You are removing the safety systems. Yeah, that will cause the reactor to explode. Eventually, but first, it'll give us about 3 times normal thrust. He was working faster now, bypassing failsafes and recalibrating magnetic containment on the fly, enough to punch through their blockade. For how long? 30 minutes, maybe 40. He met her eyes. After that, the reactor goes critical, and we have about 3 minutes to eject the core before we become a very expensive firework. Those are terrible odds. You have better ones? She smiled, fierce and bright. Do it. Cole finished the modifications in 12 minutes, working with the kind of focused intensity that came from knowing he was one mistake away from instant death. When he crawled back into the cockpit, sweat-soaked and shaking, the reactor was running 30% above redline and climbing. The ship felt different, angrier, more alive. Strap in, he said. This is going to be rough. The moment they lifted off, every sensor in the fleet locked onto them. Cole didn't try to hide. He punched the throttle to maximum and threw them into a straight burn toward the thinnest part of the blockade. The Wayfarer screamed in protest, hull plates rattling, but the modified reactor poured power into the engines like liquid fire. They were fast, faster than any Scout-class ship had a right to be. But the fleet was ready. Weapons fire lit up the void. Cole threw the ship into evasive maneuvers that should have torn them apart, pulling G's that made his vision tunnel and his ribs feel like they were cracking. Vespera was silent beside him, her patterns strobing with each violent course change. "Impact in 3 seconds," the computer announced calmly. Cole rolled the ship, and a plasma lance passed through the space they'd just occupied. Another roll, another near miss. The modified reactor was screaming now, temperature climbing past the point where it should have melted down. But it held. Just barely. "We're not going to make it," Vespera said. "Watch me." He did something that no sane pilot would attempt. He flew straight at the largest ship in the blockade, a dreadnought that outmassed the Wayfarer by a factor of 10,000. At the last possible second, he cut the engines and let momentum carry them forward while he dumped every ounce of power into the sensor jammers. To the dreadnought's targeting systems, the Wayfarer simply vanished. They passed within meters of the dreadnought's hull, so close that Cole could see individual rivet marks, and then they were through, past the blockade, with open space ahead. "Reactor critical in 2 minutes," the computer announced. Cole was already bringing them into a hard deceleration burn, fighting to bleed off velocity before they had to eject the core. Numbers scrolled across his display, temperatures, pressures, containment field integrity. All of them were in the red. 1 minute to critical. There, Vespera pointed at a debris field ahead, the remnants of an old battle, enough wreckage to hide in. "If we can reach it..." "On it!" Cole threw them into the debris field, threading between broken hulls and dead ships. The reactor was dying now. Really dying, the magnetic containment failing in cascading waves. "Brace for ejection." He hit the manual release. The reactor core blew free of the ship in a spray of coolant and superheated plasma. For a moment, it hung in space behind them, a miniature sun, then it detonated. The explosion was silent in the vacuum, but the Wayfarer's sensors went white with the electromagnetic pulse. Cole felt the shockwave hit them, throwing them into a tumbling spin through the debris field. He grabbed the manual controls, fighting to stabilize, but without the reactor, they had no power, no engines, no life support. They were dead in space. Vespera's hand found his in the darkness. "Did we make it?" "I think so." He checked the passive sensors. The fleet was breaking off, probably assuming they'd died in the explosion. "We're alive, for now." "And the ship?" "Dead." Cole couldn't help it. He laughed, slightly hysterical. "We're drifting in a debris field in a dead ship with no reactor and about 6 hours of air. But we're alive." Vespera started laughing, too, and for a long moment, they just sat there in the darkness, holding hands and laughing like lunatics, while the universe tried to decide how to kill them next. They had 3 hours of air left when the assassins found them. Cole was in the cargo hold, trying to cobble together a distress beacon from spare parts and desperation when the magnetic clamps hit the hull. The sound reverberated through the dead ship like a death knell. "Vespera!" He grabbed the pneumatic wrench, his only weapon, and moved toward the airlock. "We've got company." She was already there, her patterns blazing combat bright. "How many?" "Don't know, but they're boarding." He could hear the cutting torch now, smell the ozone as they burned through the outer hatch. "Get to the engine compartment. Lock yourself in." "No. This isn't a negotiation. I am not hiding while you die for me." Her voice had that harmonic edge again, but this time it was fury, not fear. "We fight together." There was no time to argue. The outer hatch blew inward in a spray of molten metal, and the assassins came through. There were 4 of them, heavily augmented, more machine than organic, with targeting optics and weapons that glowed with lethal charge. The lead assassin's optical sensors focused on Cole, and synthesized voice crackled through the dead air. "Human, surrender the princess, and your death will be efficient." Cole's response was to throw the pneumatic wrench. It hit the lead assassin square in the optical cluster, not enough to destroy, but enough to disrupt. In that split second of blindness, Cole moved. He'd spent 3 years learning every centimeter of this ship, could navigate it in the dark, in 0G in his sleep. The assassins had perfect tactical training and enhanced reflexes. But they didn't know the terrain. Cole ducked into a maintenance shaft. and the first plasma bolt meant for him took out a coolant line instead. Superheated gas sprayed across the cargo hold. He emerged behind the second assassin and used a section of broken pipe like a club, striking at the exposed servo joints in the augmented spine. The assassin went down, but the others were already adjusting, their AI combat routines adapting to his tactics. A plasma bolt grazed his shoulder, and Cole felt his whole arm go numb. He rolled, grabbed the fallen assassin's weapon, and fired blind. He missed, but Vespera didn't. She'd found a plasma cutter from his toolkit and used it like a sword, slashing across the third assassin's visual sensors. Blind, the machine man stumbled, and Vespera struck again, finding the power core beneath its chest plating. The assassin convulsed and collapsed. "Behind you," Cole shouted. Vespera spun, but the fourth assassin was already on her, massive augmented hands closing around her throat. Her patterns flared desperately bright, but the machine didn't care about light. Cole moved without thinking. He drove the broken pipe into the assassin's spine with all his strength, feeling the crunch of metal on metal. Once, twice, 3 times. The assassin released Vespera and turned on him, but Cole kept striking, kept fighting with the desperate fury of a man who had nothing left to lose. The assassin's hand caught him across the jaw, and Cole felt something crack. His vision went white. But his hands kept moving, finding the assassin's power core, tearing at the connections with bleeding fingers until something gave and the machine went limp. Cole collapsed against the bulkhead, tasting blood. His shoulder was burned, his jaw was probably broken, and he was pretty sure at least 2 of his ribs were cracked. "Cole," Vespera was at his side, her cool hands on his face. "Cole, look at me." He managed to focus on her golden eyes. "We win." "Yes, for now." Her patterns were pulsing erratically. Fear, relief, something else he couldn't name. "But you are hurt." "I'm functional." He tried to stand and immediately regretted it. "Need to secure the ship. More might come." "No," her voice was iron. "No more." She helped him to the communication console and powered it up using the dead assassin's equipment. Her fingers moved across the controls with sudden authority. No hesitation. "What are you doing?" Cole asked. "Ending this." She activated the long-range transmitter. "I am done hiding." The transmission went out across all Imperial channels, unencrypted, impossible to ignore. Vespera sat in the pilot's chair, her formal bearing returning despite the torn undershirt and the smear of machine oil across her luminous cheek. When she spoke, it was with the voice of command, the voice of a woman born to rule galaxies. "This is Crown Princess Vespera of Aethelgard, daughter of Emperor Thaddeus, heir to the eternal throne. I speak now to my father, to the Imperial Council, and to all who serve the Empire." Cole stood behind her, out of camera range, his broken ribs protesting every breath, but he stayed there, a silent support. "I was not abducted," Vespera continued. "I fled the assassination attempts orchestrated by my cousin Aldrich, who seeks to steal the throne through murder. I fled the prison of my own palace, where every choice was made for me, where I was a piece to be traded in political games I never chose to play." Her patterns flared brighter, "And I was saved by a human, a mechanic named Cole of Earth, who asked for nothing and gave everything, who showed me that the Empire's perfect logic is hollow without heart, that our mathematical precision is meaningless without courage." She turned slightly, and Cole realized she was looking at him. "This man has flown through a nebula that defeated your best AI pilots. He has repaired a reactor with his bare hands. He has fought assassins to protect me, and he has asked for no reward, no recognition, no place in my world." Back to the camera. "But I demand it for him. I demand the Empire recognize that humanity, messy, chaotic, passionate humanity, has something we have forgotten in our millennia of cold logic. They have the spark that makes survival worth the struggle. They have heart." Her voice hardened. "I will return to Aethelgard, but not as a prisoner, not as a political pawn. I return as your crown princess, and I return with Cole at my side. He will be recognized as a hero of the Empire. He will be granted full citizenship and all the honors due to one who saved the heir to the throne." A pause. When she spoke again, her voice was softer but no less certain. "Or I will not return at all. The choice is yours, Father. Accept that your daughter has chosen her own path or lose her forever to the stars." She cut the transmission. Silence filled the cockpit. "That was," Cole couldn't find words. "You just declared war on your own government." "No, I declared my independence." She stood and crossed to him, her hands finding his, "and I offered them a choice, adapt or lose everything." "They'll never accept it. A human in the imperial court?" "They will, because my father loves me more than he loves politics. And because," she smiled, fierce and beautiful, "I just broadcast proof that human ingenuity surpasses our technology. Every shipyard, every fleet command, every corporation is going to want to study you, to understand how you do what you do. I'm not some curiosity to be dissected. No, you are proof that the Empire needs humanity as much as humanity needs the Empire." Her patterns pulsed, steady now, certain. "You are the future." The long-range comms crackled to life. "Princess Vespera," the voice was deep, resonant, unmistakably imperial. "This is Emperor Thaddeus. I am relieved to hear you are alive." Vespera squeezed Cole's hand, then released it and returned to the console. "Father? I have reviewed your transmission, and I have reviewed the tactical reports from the fleet engagement. The maneuvers you described that this human performed, they should be impossible. They would be impossible for our AI systems, but humans navigate by instinct, by feel." A long pause. "You ask much. I ask for what is deserved." Another pause, longer this time. Cole could almost hear the political calculus, the weighing of options and consequences. "Very well," the Emperor said finally. "You may return with your companion. He will be granted provisional citizenship and protection as a guest of the throne. But understand, daughter, this changes everything. The Empire cannot acknowledge that a human bested our fleet without consequences." "I understand. The consequences are that we become stronger, together." "Perhaps." The Emperor's voice was thoughtful now. "I will dispatch a royal escort to your location. They will bring a reactor core and technicians to make your vessel operational. You have," a trace of warmth entered his voice, "my word that you will be safe." "Thank you, Father." The transmission ended. Vespera sank back into the chair, her patterns dimming with exhaustion. "It is done." "Just like that?" Cole couldn't quite believe it. "We win?" "For now. The real battle will be at court, convincing the council, navigating the politics." She looked up at him. "But yes, we have won the right to fight that battle together." Cole moved to her, ignoring the protests from his broken ribs. He cupped her face in his hands, seeing his reflection in her golden eyes, a grease-stained mechanic who'd somehow stumbled into galactic politics. "I still don't belong in a palace," he said. "No, you belong in the stars. Building things, fixing things, making the impossible possible," she smiled. "I simply plan to be there with you." He kissed her then, gentle and thorough, tasting victory and hope and the promise of a future he'd never dared imagine. Outside, the debris field slowly rotated. The Imperial fleet held position, waiting for orders. And somewhere in the distance, the Ashmark Nebula churned with lightning and new stars being born. The royal escort arrived within hours, 3 pristine ships bearing the Emperor's personal seal. They brought technicians who looked at Cole's jury-rigged reactor modifications with a mixture of horror and fascination, and a new reactor core that was probably worth more than he'd earned in his entire life. Cole supervised the installation personally, unable to help himself. The Imperial technicians worked with perfect precision and zero intuition, and he found himself correcting their work more than once. "The magnetic containment is 0.2 degrees off optimal," he said, his hand pressed against the housing. The lead technician, a Sarvathi with compound eyes and 4 arms, consulted his scanner. "The diagnostic shows perfect alignment." "Your diagnostic is wrong." Cole made the adjustment himself, feeling the vibration smooth out under his palm. "There, now it's right." The technician stared at him for a long moment, then made a notation on his data pad. Fascinating. The journey to Aethelgard took 6 days. 6 days for Cole's ribs to heal in the medical bay. 6 days for Vespera to coach him on court protocol. 6 days to prepare for a life he never wanted and couldn't escape. On the 7th day they arrived. Aethelgard was beautiful, a planet of crystalline spires and floating gardens, all mathematics and perfect symmetry. The royal palace sat at the center of the capital, a structure so precisely engineered it looked like a geometric dream made manifest. Cole hated it on sight. It is rather austere, Vespera admitted as their shuttle descended, but it has its charms. It looks like someone built a spreadsheet and forgot to add the fun. She laughed. That is an accurate description of most imperial architecture. The landing ceremony was everything Cole feared. Crowds of luminous aliens in formal wear, officials with calculating eyes, and at the center of it all, Emperor Thaddeus himself. The emperor was tall, with the same bioluminescent patterns as Vespera, but traced in silver instead of gold. His gaze was sharp, assessing. "So," the emperor said, looking Cole up and down, "this is the human who bested my fleet." "I didn't best anyone, Your Majesty. I just flew a ship." Cole had practiced the formal address, but it still felt wrong in his mouth. "You flew impossible maneuvers through a nebula, outmaneuvered AI pilots, and modified a reactor core beyond its theoretical limits." The Emperor's patterns pulsed with something that might have been amusement. "That is considerably more than just flying a ship." "I did what needed doing." "Indeed." The Emperor gestured to the crowd. "My advisors tell me you are a disruption, that acknowledging human capability will destabilize our technological supremacy, that I am making a mistake." Cole met his gaze evenly. "Are you?" "No." The Emperor smiled, and in that moment Cole saw where Vespera got her fierce determination. "I am investing in the future. You will work with our engineering corps. Teach them what you know. Help us understand how to integrate human intuition with our technology. I'm a mechanic, not a teacher." "You are whatever the Empire needs you to be." The Emperor's voice hardened slightly. "That is the price of loving my daughter." Cole felt Vespera's hands slip into his. "With respect, Your Majesty, I don't love her because of her title. I love her in spite of it." Silence rippled through the crowd. Vespera's patterns flared brilliant gold. Then the Emperor laughed, a genuine, surprised sound. "You have courage, human. I will grant you that." He turned to Vespera. "Daughter, you choose well." The crowd began to applaud, uncertain at first, then building to genuine enthusiasm. Politics, Cole realized. They were witnessing a political moment, the Emperor publicly blessing a union that would reshape imperial society. But beneath the politics, he saw something simpler in the Emperor's eyes, a father who was glad his daughter was alive and happy. That night in Vespera's private quarters, a suite of rooms that was somehow both opulent and sterile, they finally had a moment alone. "So," Cole said, looking out at the crystalline cityscape, "this is my life now, palace intrigue and court politics." "It does not have to be." Vespera came to stand beside him, her reflection ghostly in the window. "The Empire has shipyards, engineering facilities, places where your skills would be valued more than your ability to navigate dinner conversations. You'd let me just leave, work on ships?" "I would insist on it." She turned to face him fully. "I did not save you from the Orion Reach only to trap you in a gilded cage. You belong in the stars, Cole, building things, fixing things." "And you?" "I have duties here, responsibilities." Her patterns pulsed sadly. "But I also have the fastest ships in the fleet and a standing order that you are to be provided with anything you need. Distance is manageable." "You've thought about this." "I have thought about nothing else for 6 days." She took his hands. "I will not ask you to be something you are not. But I will ask you to stay close enough that I can find you when the politics become unbearable." Cole pulled her into his arms, feeling the familiar heat of her skin, the steady pulse of her patterns. "I can do that." "Good." She kissed him, soft and sweet. "Because I am not finished with you, grease monkey." Promises, promises. They moved to her bed, a thing of crystalline supports and perfect ergonomics that Cole immediately decided to ruin with rumpled sheets and improper conduct. Vespera seemed enthusiastic about the plan. As they came together, her patterns blazing bright enough to light the entire suite, Cole thought about the impossible path that had led him here. From the Orion Reach to the Imperial Palace. From hunted fugitive to honored guest. From a mechanic who trusted no one to a man who'd found someone worth fighting for. "What are you thinking?" Vespera asked later, her head on his chest, her fingers tracing patterns on his skin. "That I still don't belong here. No, you belong to the stars. She lifted her head to meet his eyes. But the stars brought you to me, so perhaps you belong here too, at least sometimes. Sometimes, he agreed, when the engines are quiet and the ships are running smooth. And the rest of the time? The rest of the time I'll be out there. He gestured vaguely toward the window, toward space, making the impossible possible. It's what humans do. It is what you do, Vespera corrected, and it is why I love you. They stayed like that, wrapped in each other, until the artificial dawn began to lighten the crystalline spires. Outside, the Empire continued its perfect clockwork rotation. Inside, a princess and a mechanic proved that sometimes the best things in life were messy and chaotic and completely unplanned. In the weeks that followed, Cole did exactly what he'd promised. He worked with the Imperial Engineering Corps, teaching them to feel vibrations and trust their instincts. He frustrated them, challenged them, and slowly, grudgingly earned their respect. And when the politics became too much, when the weight of the palace threatened to crush him, he'd take the fastest ship in the fleet and fly to the edges of the Empire, where the stars were thick and the nebulas churned with possibility. Vespera always found him, always knew where he'd be. And together, in the quiet moments between duty and desire, they built something neither the Empire's perfect logic nor